a couple of hours, quarantined for a week. It will move on to next week. Anyways, so yeah, I've been in the house. We haven't had visitors. We haven't gone out for a week, keeping our social distancing, our social responsibility, and I have a lot more respect for Bill now. On the parenting angle, I work full time. Bill takes care of the tiny man. And that kid is crazy. He's straight insane. I don't know why I don't see it in the morning, the 4 hours before I go to work.
Because he's just waking up.
And the weekend, when I'm chilling with the baby all weekend. But yeah, he's wild. He's a wild man. And it's, Bill's being sick, so he's typically he's in his office or he's upstairs. He's not hanging out around the family to try and cut down on transmission in case he does, And the baby is tearing the entire house apart, and I tell him not to, and he's got this really, really powerful sad face, and he'll even get like the single little tear slowly rolling down, because mama told him no, and that makes him sad. I'm just like, you know what? Yeah, tear it up, bud. Do you need some help? Here, have a spatula. Go smack that stuff.
You're a pushover. He's 3.
He's 3.
Of course he's going to play you like a violin.
He's got a really powerful sad face.
Well, he knows. He knows what he can get away with you versus me.
It gets you in the mama heart.
I mean, it's not like I bust out corporal punishment on him, but I interact with him and I'm right there with him most of the time that he's awake. So
yeah,
I don't allow him to tear apart the house, but I still allow him to play and be free and run around like a wild man. But constraints.
It makes the baby happy. He wants to. And he's got a thing with butter. I don't know what it is.
I don't know either.
We have to put all the butter up because he's just got a thing with butter.
Well, what he's doing is he's repeating what he learned in school because they went over utensils and their use. So he wants a knife because he knows he's supposed to cut butter with knife.
Yeah.
So,
but I'm pretty
if you don't give him a knife, he's going to be unhappy. So he'll use, a fork, a spoon, a spatula, a pair of tongs. He's trying to repeat what he's trying to, he was taught in school by cutting the butter.
I mean, that part I get, but I'm pretty sure the putting it in his hair.
Well, that may have been an accident at first, and then it's just like, I'm 3. Might as well put butter in my hair. So.
Anyway, so yeah, it's.
And Daddy wears his hair, back. So.
That's true. Yeah. So there's a couple of things I thought we might go over briefly before we move into a few meatier things. First off, if you're waiting for results, if you're sick, if you're confirmed positive, definitely, yes, please do stay inside. Vulnerable populations, this virus can be very deadly to them. The immune compromised, the elderly. It's not going to be easy for them to get over it. I think on the last podcast I had mentioned China seeing a 27% mortality rate in their elderly populations. So you definitely want to keep you want to keep the spread down. But there's things that you can do at home. You can go for walks. I have seen so many people, more people just strolling past the house. They're enjoying it, going outside with the family, keeping the distance between them and everybody else. The outside.
What I tell people is, especially for the younger generation who think, well, you know what, I can't get it, so I don't give a damn. I'm just going to go gather up 100 of my friends and go have a beer party on the beach somewhere. Is the life that they save, maybe their grandmothers or their parents. And think about them. What will you feel like if you get it and you give it to your parents or your grandparents? Yeah. How will you feel then? And they're like, well, they're in good health. I'm like, I was in good health until this. So,
Yeah.
but that's why I explain it to them and try to put it in terms where it's actually, real to them. You might not die from it, and your buddy, Skeeter over here, who's doing keg stands on a keg of beer, or Bobby Joe, in her $2 teeth, she may not die from it, but your grandparents or your parents can. So think about them.
A Skeeter, you say?
Yeah, Skeeter.
Skeeter?
Came up with that name myself. Skeeter. Sounds like a good hick name. And I'm not making fun of every hick. I mean, there's some really good hicks out there. But, all right. What do you got on your notes there?
Well, that's a good segue into this. So, as we were saying earlier, vulnerable populations, the immune compromised, the elderly, were having the highest mortality rates. But that does not mean that other groups are not going to suffer difficulties. Illinois reported the first documented case of a child dying of corona. To the best of our knowledge, at the time that we gathered the information for this, there were no underlying health conditions. I can make the words. There were no underlying health conditions identified at the time, but they're still looking into that.
But what I read on the CDC, speaking of that infant, was that the child may have been exposed before and was recovering from it and then got it again. Because the child has been sick for a while. It wasn't like quick, like got it and then boom, died.
Well, no,
but that is definitely the first confirmed. There are a couple of those who, according to the World Health Organization, who have passed, who are under the age of 18, but they had underlying health issues that were exaggerated by the coronavirus issue itself. I mean, you have to be able to breathe in order to, live. It's kind of like one of those things,
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
You do have to be able to breathe to be able to live. So, on that note, the investigation is still going on into that child's death to see if there were underlying health conditions. Transmission from mother to baby. We do have confirmed cases of pregnant women who were positive for the virus giving birth to children who were also positive for the virus. So we do know that it can be transmitted from the mother to the baby in utero.
Wow.
Still do not know whether or not the virus is transmissible in breast milk. You are going to hear a lot of differing information from a lot of differing sources, but it boils down to we do not know whether or not the virus is transmissible that way. From my personal opinion, and I am not a doctor, nor am I the CDC, if the mother is producing those antibodies, she has already been exposed, and we already know that the baby's exposed in utero, so I would personally say that it might be a negligible risk, because the child is probably already exposed. That being said, definitely, if you are pregnant, consult with your provider before you make those decisions on infant feeding. Find out, make the decision that's safest for you and your family. But if somebody tells you that they know one way or the other, they don't.
So, on that note, though, are those mothers who are breastfeeding, are they practicing the social distancing?
It's difficult. It's difficult to practice social distancing when you're feeding an infant regardless. They do recommend if you're sick and you're feeding your baby, if you're formula feeding, practice immaculate hygiene. The mask, washing the hands, gloves, everything. Make sure everything is sterile more than you would have beforehand. If you're breastfeeding and you're sick, also wear a mask when you're feeding your baby. It's the same thing, just the hand washing, immaculate hand sanitization. You don't want to.
But your baby is 3 years old, and you have problems with social distancing with him. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've looked in the window, and seeing him, laying out on on your lap or cuddling with you.
Well, I am.
I mean, I know it's going to be really hard, though, for a mother and a newborn to social distance because of that bonding.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's a good
especially
point.
there are women who also have issues with babies latching.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's something they definitely need to talk to their pediatrician about.
Definitely talk to your pediatrician. And I would say this: talk to your pediatrician and trust your pediatrician above any other person that you're going to talk to. Definitely get your information from multiple providers, but from your providers. The internet is a sketch-tastic place, and you are going to get a lot of bad advice there.
Stay away from Facebook doctors.
Oh God, yes. On that note, Will brought up a good point about infant bonding and stuff like that. If you have to isolate yourself from your infant, please rest assured that will not disrupt your bonding with your infant. There are plenty of mothers whose babies were in NICUs that they weren't able to hold for days at a time, and they have still bonded. They have still bonded quite well with their infants. There are parents who've adopted children. They love their children just as much as the children their biological children that they gave birth to. It is going to break your heart, I know, but you will still bond with your baby, and you will still love them just as much as you would have beforehand, and they will still love you just as much as they would have if you hadn't.
I wanted to pick him up so much.
He was so tiny.
He's so tiny.
Just the tiniest little guy.
He's a tiny man. He's not tiny no more. He's not.
Okay.
Even though you call him the tiny man. He's not the tiny man.
He's Mama's tiny man. So, moving on to that. We're going to provide some links for various updates in the comments. And the biggest myth that we've seen going around, or that I've seen going around because we've been social distancing, is that coronavirus is biowarfare. We will be providing a link that debunks that hypothesis, also in the description. But we're going to lay out a few things here. Like we did in the last podcast, viruses mutate. That's just what they do. In addition to mutating based on selective pressure, occasionally certain microbes will share genetic information with other microbes. Now, there's a host, literally hundreds, thousands of microbes out there, and there's no possible way I would have the list of which ones do that and which ones don't in my head, but it's a thing that they do. A virus mutating on its own, it's just what they do. It does not necessarily mean it's biowarfare. Does not necessarily mean that it isn't, but a mutated virus in and of itself is not indicative of biowarfare. There's a couple of things. There are two main places that this rumor is originating from, and depending on where it's originating from depends on what flavor it takes. One main place it's originating from is China. There's a big rumor going around China that the U.S. genetically modified the coronavirus in an attempt to make the Chinese sick, and that it failed, and we got ourselves sick, and it's just making them look bad, and there's that. The other one, of course, is that rumor has originated in the U.S. There are even a couple of politicians who should know better, but this is the world we live in nowadays, where apparently we all get to act like we're freaking five, and have been perpetuating the rumor that China genetically engineered this virus to get the United States sick.
Rush Limbaugh. He's been talking about it for the last week. I've been kind of keeping an eye on him, but he said on his podcast that this was a deliberate attack by the Chinese upon the United States.
Rush Limbaugh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't listen to him because, yeah.
Well, I believe in keeping my enemies, and everybody close.
So yeah, there's first off, I lost my train of thought now. Rush Limbaugh, God, it just makes me mad. I wish he would just. Okay. One of the other things that perpetuates that rumor in the United States being the fact that there is a class 4 laboratory in the province where this virus originated from. There are 6 class 4 laboratories in the United States. So if we're basing proximity of laboratories, maybe we did.
What is a class 4 laboratory?
The class 4 laboratories are the ones that work with the most virulent strains of microbes. They've got the protection and equipment to make sure that they're maintained without leaking out. So that's another thing. There's rumors going around that they were experimenting, or that the Chinese government released this virus on accident because they were playing with it and whatever. Movies aren't a good place to get information on how laboratories work.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah.
Not at all.
There are a lot of protocols involved to handling infectious organisms in a class 4 laboratory, and the chances of somebody just, doing an oops and stepping in a pile of virus and then walking outside is non-existent. There are multiple redundancies built in to prevent biological escape. No one's slipping a vial in their pocket and forgetting about it and just taking it home.
This is Homer Simpson.
Yeah. There's no way for a virus. Well, I can't say there's no way. Nothing is 100% certain. There is almost no way for a virus. It would have to be a perfect conflux of multiple unlikely events for a virus to slip out of those laboratories. So,
and that's what a class 4 lab is labs that would only handle viruses and alike. Warfare?
Yeah.
Or are they warfare labs? Or?
No, they're research labs also. They're looking for, first off, they're looking for ways to potentially prevent or cure infections.
Don't we have one in Seattle, one in Los Angeles, and one in New York? The epicenters right now? And then I think Atlanta is number 4.
I think we have one in Atlanta. And I'm pretty sure we have one in New York, and I am not sure where the other ones are.
I think there's one outside of Los Angeles, and then the one in Seattle is run by UW, along with the CDC.
University of Washington has an amazing virology program. Their
do.
virology lab has won accolades from the CDC. I have worked with them in a professional capacity, not there, but from the laboratory I work with, I worked with people there, getting stuff sent. They have always been amazingly professional. I have always gotten exactly what I needed from them. I've got nothing but good things to say about the University of Washington and their virology lab. They are top notch.
I'm just wondering if this is what playing into the conspiracy theories, because also where the 4 labs are.
It could be, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's not true. I mean, but I'm just saying. So can we talk a little bit about the symptomology of the coronavirus and what you should do if you have these things, and what's the difference between this and a cold?
Symptomology has been evolving. Our understanding of symptomology hasn't been evolving. Our understanding has been. So originally it was just reported that it was all respiratory symptoms. New evidence is emerging that there are gastric symptoms as well. So you may be experiencing GI upset. That is now also considered a potential symptom. It is primarily respiratory. So that is the reason why hospitals are needing ventilators and things like that, because it's a respiratory illness. It's going to be causing inflammation. It's going to be making it hard for people to breathe. And that is the issue right there. There's also, I was speaking to somebody earlier who was mentioning that occasionally there's an upset in the human immune response, where basically your immune system goes into overdrive trying to kill whatever's going on with you. And it can do that regardless of what you've got. If you've got coronavirus, if you've got a rhinovirus, if, occasionally your body just decides that whatever has invaded you, it needs the nuclear option. The problem is the nuclear option kills the person as well as the virus. So they're seeing some of that in a few of these patients also. Otherwise, healthy people, their immune system is going into overdrive. I don't have hard numbers on that. I don't think it's a lot of people. Like I said, it's something that happens.
But it does happen. It happened to the soccer player. He was a professional soccer player.
That young kid.
And when he passed away, though, I mean, his fever was 107 when he passed. But I want to read what the World Health Organization says about coronavirus. People may be sick with the virus from 1 to 14 days before developing symptoms. The most common symptoms of coronavirus disease, COVID-19, are fever, tiredness, dry cough. Most people, about 80%, recover from the disease without needing specialized treatment. So again, the symptomology of it is cough, fever, tiredness, difficulty breathing only in severe cases, and the most vulnerable are the elderly, those with pre-existing medical conditions, asthma, heart disease, or previous lung issues. And here's the one that's going to get y'all: if you're a smoker, you're already slowly killing yourself. Add coronavirus to it, now you've sped it up. And I actually saw on the CDC did a video on it, and they said for smokers that it basically is speeding up the destruction of your lungs by 3 to 4 fold. So what you're doing by smoking is going this way just enough to destroy your lungs. Now triple that speed of destroying your lungs. They have a really great video about how it actually attacks the cells and breaks off the little, physalis or whatever they are? The little hairs in your lungs.
Cilia.
Cilias, physalis, whatever. And it
Nope.
gets inside there, and it actually destroys the cell and then scars it and it flakes off. But they have a really good animated video about it. I'll try to link that in the description below as well. Okay, so what else should we talk about? Cover. Got anything else in your notes there? No?
Done with the notes.
Okay.
So, I do have one thing I would like to address. There's been some rumors going around that certain people are not eligible for life-saving treatment from...
Oh, yeah.
This is true and false. So... a lot of this comes down to the fact that there are limited supplies for the influx of patients that some locations are getting. So what they're having to do is they are having to triage patients. They are having to decide who gets what treatment just because they don't have the supplies to treat everyone. So what is happening is basically they're making a decision. If you've got an 80-year-old patient who comes in and you've got an 8-year-old who comes in and they both have the exact same symptoms and the disease has progressed the same way, and you've only got one ventilator, who do you give it to? They give it to the 8-year-old child. That's not to say that they are valuing any one patient over another, but it is to say that they are taking into account the projected quality of life afterwards. The unfortunate fact of the matter is the older the patient, the harder the infection is on them. And even once they've recovered, there appears to be a diminished quality of life for a lot of those patients, not so much for the younger patients. And that is part of what they are taking into account when they are making those triaging decisions. Ideally, supplies will increase to the point where every patient who presents to the hospital with corona infection will be able to access the exact same level of care. That being said, it is true that hospitals are currently seeking legal advice as to whether or not they can override patient wishes and enact blanket DNRs for corona patients.
What is a DNR?
That is a do not resuscitate. That
Thank
means if you stop breathing, They are looking into whether or not they can legally just not try to get you breathing again. Now, I have personal opinions about that, based on the fact that I have loved ones who are very close to me who are in the risk group, and I can't imagine somebody not doing absolutely everything they could to make sure that my loved one makes it through an infection, something that they didn't ask for, that happened to them because somebody, that's my personal opinion, makes me rather angry. From a professional standpoint, I understand a little bit, especially because part of the concern is with the lack of PPE that is available to a lot of hospitals and healthcare organizations. There is a great risk when resuscitating a COVID patient that the healthcare workers who perform the resuscitation will then be infected. They will then spread that disease to their other patients, and we're furthering the epidemic. It is an ethical dilemma that I have not yet resolved myself, because I haven't been able to rectify those two portions of the why the fuck wouldn't you do everything you could, and yeah, I get it, other people are going to die.
I think a lot of our friends who are in the medical field, nurses and everybody who's working currently, right now in the hospitals that we know personally, and that we have emotional connections with, I don't want to mention any names, but you know what I'm talking about. They're all fighting the same ethical dilemma right now within themselves. I mean, they're in the field because they want to make a difference and they want to help people get better. And at the same time, they're looking at, okay, we only have X amount of actual supplies versus demand. Who do we save? Do we save the man who comes in, who has a long history of substance abuse, and everything else, and he's 85, and then we have a 38-year-old who comes in? I mean, they're torn, really torn to the point where I know some of them have reached out and tried to find a way to justify it within themselves. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Do no harm. And they're really torn by this.
And that is part of the reason why, when it comes down to making triaging decisions, now this is separate from the whole DNR thing, which again I haven't reconciled myself how I feel about that. When it comes down to making these kinds of triaging decisions, typically there's a checklist involved. And part of the reason for that, as it feels bad, especially looking at it from the outside, it's like, how could you make that decision on a checklist? But part of the reason for that is to make sure that it's fair.
Yeah.
Because when you can only save one life and you have two people at risk, there's very little chance for emotion not to get involved. So these checklists are part of making sure that evaluation is fair and not emotionally influenced. And part of the reason for that...
Emotionally or financially.
Or financially. Part of the reason for that is because, again, those workers that have to make that decision, it's not a decision they want to be making. And they're going to be beating themselves up, trying to find a way to do both. And, well, sometimes you can. It's looking like in a lot of cases, you can't. At least not right now. Again, hopefully those supplies are going to be coming in. And so it's not going to be a decision people are going to have to be making. But it is something that is currently being done.
I see where a lot of governors right now who have put in requests for ventilators and PPEs and stuff like that. They're upset that of course, I'm not blaming anybody here, but I'm just telling you the facts of this, because that's what I'm kind of abrupt that way, but that's what I do as I talk about the facts. Is these governors are upset that there's no one on the federal level stopping the gouging, of the prices for these things. So they're going out on the free market to try to get PPEs and supplies, and they find out that they're, in a lot of circumstances, they're bidding against each other for the same equipment and the same supplies. Okay, so with that said, I want to go back a little bit, and I want to ask you about the DNR.
Mm-hmm.
Are you touching your face?
I am 100% touching
You're going
my
to get the
face.
coronavirus. I'm going to give you the coronavirus. You probably just got it because you touched the table here, and now you touched your face. Okay, but the DNR.
I did it again.
Yeah,
I can't.
I know, right? You're dead.
Okay.
You're goodbye. You know, the DNR.
Yeah.
Do not resuscitate.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have a DNR?
You do not.
So, I mean, you're going to do life-saving measures in case I stop breathing?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I just want to make sure you're not going to trade me in for two 25s, you know.
Oh, God, that'd be so much work.
Well, I mean, you might find two 25-year-olds who, you know, one will actually, you know, help you fix your house and, you know, and do all that stuff. And, you know, I know, right? And there's all that life insurance, too. So, all right, that's cool. I didn't know about that. I just wanted to make sure we got that on camera. She doesn't have a, you know.
I can't put a DNR on you, honey. That's something that
well,
you
it's
do.
that hard to forge my signature. It's just a bunch of circles. So, right? All right. And next and last question is, well, I guess I want to put this in two ways. Is they just found that the coronavirus is now hitting the homeless population in the Los Angeles and the Seattle Tacoma area, and they're with the homeless. First off, they're not getting the best medical attention already.
Yeah.
But they're trying to stop other homeless people from taking the items that used to belong to the person who was. Who has coronavirus, and if they're hospitalized, they're like, oh look, there's a tent, you know, and the coronavirus can stay on these things. Now, along with that, a lot of people in these areas, especially in the Los Angeles and Seattle areas, where there's been a huge influx of homeless population over the last 5 years. A lot of people I saw online who have been talking about this wanted to know: is the coronavirus kind of like Ebola, where once the person dies from it, if they were to die from it, is their body then contaminated with the coronavirus still? Or does coronavirus die with the patient?
Well,
do you know anything about that?
Yes and no. So the viruses replicate by using your cells. So they conscript your cellular replication. They've got a little, and they stab you into your cell, and then they inject their RNA, and then your cell, which should be going about doing its cellular business, making proteins and everything else that it does. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm just going to make a bunch of these. Okay, fine. So then your cell just cranks out a bunch of viruses until it explodes, and then there's a bunch more viruses running around, and they all do the same thing. So you actually have to have a living body for that to happen. Some viruses can be dormant outside of a living body for some of them for years. Coronavirus is not one of those things. It will take a couple of days, but eventually the virus is going to die once the host is dead.
Okay, so it's not if the patient dies, the coronavirus doesn't live on. So, kind of a follow-up, I know that was the last question, but the follow-up to that is, what is shedding the virus? Now, they say that, if the corona patient can shed the virus. Are you talking about like skin cells shedding? And I'm not kidding. There are a lot of people who are asking about this online. So I wanted to make sure, to kind of address these, about if the patient dies and what is actual shedding of the virus.
So this is a respiratory virus. So it is currently infecting the infected person's lungs. That thing that I said earlier about it conscripts your cellular replication to make a bunch of copies, explodes, goes out in the system, does its thing, right? But it's doing that in the lungs. So when you're shedding that virus, it's because you're coughing and all those little viruses that are in there that's been exploding. Yeah. They're shooting out.
Okay.
And that's what that means. Now, different viruses shed from different places. GI viruses will shed in stool. Respiratory viruses shed that way. And some do both. Some viruses, All
right. quickly, can we talk about who we are? To remind the people that we're not, basically, two people who just, stalk the internet and read everything off the internet and believe it's 100% of it's true. What do you do for a living, and what is your experience to be able to talk on the subject?
Well, I am not a virologist.
Nope, neither am I.
No. I have 20 plus years working in a clinical laboratory environment.
Okay. And would you say that, on a scale of 1 to 10, that you're probably at about a 45 because of your family history, because of the medical knowledge, that has been not only passed down to you, but I mean, we read about this stuff, in our spare time for fun. We do, and it's not a joke. I mean, we're very curious individuals, and we want to learn about these things. So, and with your mom and your entire family's medical, experience and everything else, and even our daughter to some extent, is in this, now. I mean, so, and we have the the firsthand experience now too.
Yay!
Yay! All right. So we went 38 minutes there. So
Ooh, sorry about going
no,
over
it's
time.
right. But anything you'd like to say in closing?
Don't change your daily routine up too much. There's a ton of people who are self-isolating, and it's all, I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to like do a couple of fun things, but don't try to totally reinvent your life. Do as much of your normal habits as you can, because that's going to make it easier for you to get through self-isolation. Than trying to completely reinvent you. Not saying don't take this opportunity to try and do some stuff that maybe you didn't have time to do before, but you were really interested in. Yeah, knock yourself out. Do that. That's awesome. But don't try to completely reinvent your daily routine. It's going to cause more stress for you in the long run. Just do a couple of little things here and there, and as much as you can keep your routine the same, do so. Unless you're a parent, in which case it will never be the same again, because now you're stuck with your tiny demolition team destroying your whole home.
I knew where you're going with that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, in closing, anything that I'd like to add is, especially for those who are out there who think that they're not going to get this because you're young and you're healthy and you eat right and you do everything right. I'm sorry to tell you, you don't know who has it, where you're going to get it, what you're going to touch, and you don't know what's going to happen next. And the life you save, again, could be your mother's or your grandparents, or it could be your friend, Sam, who is more of an acquaintance because you don't know about the fact that he had a lung transplant when he was 16. You don't know, all right? And so think about others for instance. Now, if you have to self-isolate, try to do something besides just Netflix. If you have to, check on each other, within people in your own household, emotional stability, and converse with them. Even if you have to sit 6 feet away, one at each end of the dining room table, do that. Work on yourself a little bit. You're never going to find a better opportunity in your lifetime than self-isolation to learn things about your family.
I threatened Bill earlier today when we were having breakfast. I told him, it's perfect. We're stuck together. You can't leave. And if you try to leave, I'll just call the police and be like, 911, he's got the corona and he's trying to take off.
The coronavirus patient. Get him! All right. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.